I woke up in a bed I didn't recognize. The sheets were stiff with starch, pale blue, and smelled faintly of lavender and rust. That rust smell, coppery, earthy, was the first thing I noticed. It clung to the back of my throat like old blood. Sunlight filtered in through gauzy curtains, casting a tremulous yellow grid across the floor. The light wavered as though the air itself were uncertain. I sat up, groggy, already sweating. My heart was pounding like I'd just escaped from drowning, though I couldn't remember what I'd been dreaming about. My hands curled instinctively, reaching for something. A cigarette, maybe. A glass of water. Someone's hand. But there was no one here. Just the quiet tick of a digital clock on the nightstand. 7:03 a.m. The numbers blinked once, then held steady. A paperback novel sat beside the clock, its cover creased and warped from moisture. I didn't recognize the title, The Walls Between Us. Inside, a dry flower was pressed between pages 212 and 213. I don't know why I bothered to check. The walls were painted beige, bland, inoffensive. There was a chair in the corner with a neatly folded sweater over the back and a small potted plant on the windowsill, its leaves curled in thirst. The plant's ceramic pot had a hairline crack down the side, like a fracture in a tooth. Everything looked like it had been arranged just right for someone else's comfort. Someone who no longer lived here. Someone who was pretending very, very hard that things were fine. I swung my legs over the side of the bed and stood up too fast. Dizziness hit me like a punch to the throat, and I staggered, hand catching the edge of the nightstand. The alarm clock fell to the floor with a clatter and stopped ticking. I froze. There was no sound at all. No hum of a refrigerator, no pipes clanking, no wind, not even birds outside. Just silence, like I'd gone deaf. Then, with an almost imperceptible click, the world resumed. The clock buzzed faintly. I could hear someone walking outside the window, shoes on gravel maybe, and a dog barking in the distance. The refrigerator whirred back to life. I went to the bathroom and splashed cold water on my face. My reflection stared back at me. Short black hair, 2 days of stubble, sunken eyes that looked like they'd seen too much too quickly. A long, thin scar ran from beneath my left ear to the base of my neck. I touched it. It felt real, tender. There was a toothbrush in the cup by the sink, a razor, deodorant. No photos on the walls, nothing personal, no mess. It all felt like a stage set, prepped and lit for a performance. I opened a drawer and found a wallet with a driver's license. Caleb R. Mahn. Age 32. Address 514 Northall Avenue. Apartment B. That name felt tolerable, like a coat I hadn't worn in years but could still fit into. Next to the wallet was a cafe name tag clipped to a navy apron. Caleb, assistant manager, Cafe Bosque. I stood there a long while, holding the name tag, trying to make the job feel like mine. It didn't, but I put it on anyway. The cafe was downstairs, tucked into the street-facing part of the building, its storefront lined with aging vines and cracked brick. A painted wooden sign hung slightly askew above the door. The C in Cafe Bosque starting to peel. The smell of burnt espresso and sugar greeted me as I walked in. "Rough night again, huh?" said a girl behind the counter. She was already in uniform, green apron dusted with flour, freckles, a braid hanging over one shoulder. Her name tag read Nina. I nodded, forcing a smile. Something like that. She handed me a prep checklist. "You're on back counter today. We're slammed until about 11. Then it's ghosts. I moved behind the counter and took over grinding beans. Everything about the process felt robotic. Dose, tamp, lock, pull. I didn't have to think. My hands remembered, even if my head didn't. The cafe filled with morning regulars. People greeted me by name. I laughed in the right places. I said, "Enjoy your day," like I meant it. But every now and then, I'd catch a flash. Someone's face glitching for a fraction of a second. The sound of a voice repeating like a skipped record. A woman's reflection in the pastry case that didn't match her movements. I kept blinking, shaking it off. At exactly 2:17 p.m., a customer dropped a porcelain cup. It shattered on the floor like a shot. The cafe went dead silent, and that's when everything changed. A man sitting near the back rose from his table. He wasn't dressed unusually, grey jacket, black jeans, but his stillness hit me like a slap. He didn't blink, didn't speak, just stood up and looked directly at me, as if I had just said his name, as if he'd been waiting. His mouth moved, but no sound came out. Everyone else in the cafe kept moving, laughing, talking, but they were wrong. Their gestures were too big, too practiced, like animatronics on a loop. I realized they were laughing out of sync with their faces. Forks scraped plates with no resistance. Liquid poured from empty cups. One woman was eating what looked like soup, but her spoon never touched anything. My throat closed. I dropped the rag I was holding and stepped back. The man at the back still hadn't moved, but now he was smiling. Not friendly, just knowing. The kind of smile you might give to a sleeping animal seconds before snapping its neck. Then, blink, and it was over. The cup was gone. The floor was clean. The cafe bustled with sound again. Nina brushed past me with a tray of muffins. "You good?" she asked, looking at me with mild concern. "Yeah," I said, even though my hands were shaking. "Just dizzy for a second." "Drink water," she said, already walking away. "You forget every damn day." I made it through the rest of my shift, but I kept seeing the man in the grey jacket out of the corner of my eye. Never directly, never close. Just there, outside the window, across the street, in a passing bus, reflected in a metal napkin holder. The worst part was that none of it scared me the way it should have. It all felt familiar. That night, I lay on the unfamiliar bed, staring at the ceiling. The light bulb buzzed faintly overhead, flickering every few seconds like it was trying to blink something out of existence. I couldn't stop thinking about the man in the cafe, about the way time froze, the way sound just stopped. Was I dreaming? The thought hit me like a sudden storm. What if this isn't the first time? What if I've had other lives like this? What if this is just another mask I'm wearing? I tried to write something down, to ground myself. I found a notepad in the kitchen and scribbled, "You are Caleb, Cafe Bosque, 514 Null Avenue. Don't forget." I stared at the words until they stopped meaning anything. Just shapes, ink scratches. Sleep came slow and full of static. Just before I drifted off, I thought I heard someone whispering from the other side of the wall. A voice I almost recognized, saying my name with unbearable tenderness. "Caleb, you're almost back." I woke up to the sound of breathing that wasn't mine. Heavy, wet, like lungs half filled with swamp water. The air was dense and hot. My body ached with a kind of fatigue that didn't come from sleep, but from survival. I opened my eyes and saw nothing, just pitch black. A second passed, then another. My breath quickened. I reached out blindly and touched something damp and soft. Sheets? Number not sheets, Soil. I was lying in mud, bare-chested. My arms and face were smeared with grime and something slick, maybe blood. My mouth tasted like pennies and mold. I pushed myself up and felt splinters scrape across my palms. Wooden planks, rotting beneath me. A faint orange glow bled through the cracks in the walls. I could make out the contours of a small, decaying room. Plank floors warped by water, a single table in the center, a door hanging crooked on rusted hinges. No windows. The house, or shack really, creaked like it was breathing in slow, deliberate exhales. I stood up on trembling legs and saw myself in a broken shard of mirror on the far wall. Same face, same dark eyes, but there was something older in them now. Wilder, like I'd been running for a long time, like something had been chasing me across decades. On the table lay a hunting knife, rusted and notched, and beside it, a photograph, warped by moisture. 3 people stood in front of what looked like this very shack. 2 women and a boy. None of their faces were visible. They were all scratched out, their heads reduced to ghostly smudges. My heart twisted. I didn't recognize them, and yet I felt an enormous grief, like a memory of love that had been drowned and buried. A name flitted across my mind, Jonah, but I didn't know who it belonged to. The door creaked louder. Then came a sound that will stay with me until I die. A wet slap of bare feet on wood, slow, measured, from just beyond the door. I grabbed the knife without thinking. The door opened a few inches, revealing a void darker than anything in the room. I held my breath, and from that darkness, a voice came, not spoken, but somehow inside me. "You left them in the water, Caleb." My body locked up. I didn't answer, couldn't. The breathing from earlier returned, louder now, closer. I stepped back toward the corner of the room, heart in my throat. Suddenly, the sound stopped. Silence. Then a single note. A woman's laugh, light and disjointed, like a recording played backward. The door slammed shut. Dust fell from the ceiling. I stood there for what felt like hours, the knife clenched so tight in my hand I didn't realize I'd cut myself. Blood dripped onto the floor. The shack creaked again, like it was trying to bend inward and swallow me. I left the shack just before dawn. The landscape outside was a skeletal forest, blackened as if by fire, mist slithering between the trees. Far in the distance, water gleamed, an enormous lake, unnaturally still. I knew without knowing that I'd done something terrible near that lake, left something or someone. Maybe that's why I couldn't bear to look at it directly. The knife weighed heavy in my hand, but heavier still was the sensation behind my eyes, a memory I couldn't quite hold. A girl in a green apron, a cup shattering, a man who didn't blink. "Rough night again, huh?" The phrase came unbidden, whispering across my mind like wind slipping through a cracked window. I blinked, disoriented, and looked down at myself. The name Caleb was carved into the flesh of my forearm. Deep, jagged, in my own handwriting. I didn't remember doing it, but I knew I had, because some part of me remembered the cafe. Some part of me remembered waking up again and again. And a deeper part, one buried beneath pain and noise, was starting to wonder if I had ever really slept at all. I woke up with a tube down my throat. My limbs jerked involuntarily as a machine beeped rapidly beside me. The fluorescent lights above flickered like they were shorting out, casting the room in a relentless stutter. A nurse appeared in my field of vision, shouting to someone out of frame. Code blue reversing. He's lucid. He's back. I couldn't move, couldn't speak, couldn't breathe. Then pain. A wrenching twist of flesh and air as the tube was yanked from my throat. I gasped, retching, coughing up something thick and sweet-smelling. My vision blurred and cleared. The room came into focus. White walls, white ceiling, silver trays, a transparent window looking out into another sterile hallway. Cameras. I was in a hospital, but not a normal one. There was something too clean about it. Every surface was slightly reflective, like glass, and the nurse's smile, though warm, never touched her eyes. Her voice was as flat as a radio announcer's. "You had another seizure," she said, brushing my hair back mechanically. "But you're safe now. You're insane. Locus Clinical Observatory, Ward H." I wanted to ask, again, but my throat was raw. Instead, I whispered, "How long have I been here?" The nurse tilted her head slightly, like the question confused her. Then she forced another practiced smile. "You're improving. Let's focus on that." I spent the day in a wheelchair, being carted from room to room. The staff asked me simple questions. "What's your name? Who is the president? What year is it?" Each time I answered Caleb, they nodded with vague relief, but wouldn't clarify anything else. The building was a labyrinth of identical halls, white floors, white ceilings, no clocks, no windows looking outside, only inward, into other rooms, where other patients sat, staring at blank walls or convulsing silently in chairs bolted to the floor. Every now and then, I caught my reflection in a polished door or observation glass. Same face, but it twitched, just once, imperceptibly fast, but enough for me to be sure it wasn't mimicking me perfectly. In the cafeteria, I was given a tray of food, colorless mashed vegetables, an orange square labeled Meal Block C, and a plastic spoon. At the next table, a man with a barcode tattooed on his scalp muttered to himself, repeating the phrase, "He keeps waking up where he left himself. He keeps waking up where he left himself." I didn't eat. Later, I was brought to a room marked Therapy Intake, Tier 4. The walls were grey here, a single chair and a wide mirror that I didn't need to be told was two-way. A doctor entered. Clipboard, white coat, red tie. He sat across from me and adjusted his glasses. His name tag read, Dr. Kelvin Thorne. "Caleb," he said, with an unreadable expression. "Do you remember the cafe?" I blinked. Something in me winced. "Yes," I said. "Sort of." "The girl with the braid? The customer who dropped the cup?" My mouth was dry. "Yes." He made a note. "And the house? The one with the photograph? With the lake?" I looked up sharply. "How do you—" "You're experiencing memory bleed," he said calmly. "Episodes of cross-life contamination. Symptoms of your condition." "What condition?" I asked. "What's wrong with me?" Dr. Thorne smiled faintly, not kindly. "You're a slow, fragmented recursion identity. Your consciousness is failing to integrate its ego constructs between sleep cycles. In simpler terms, you keep waking up wrong." He stood and walked to the mirror. "You don't know who you really are, Caleb. You only think you do because your mind keeps spinning new versions of yourself to inhabit. One for each lifetime, each dream, each crime." My stomach turned cold. "Crime." Thorne nodded at the glass. "You're being monitored for the St. Locus incident. Do you remember it yet?" "No," I said quickly. I've never been here before. This can't be my life. But it is. It always is. He turned back toward me. You've murdered 12 versions of yourself so far. They left me in my room with a soft bed, a white lamp, and no sharp objects. The nurse brought me medication in a small paper cup. I let her see me swallow it. After she left, I forced myself to vomit into the sink. The pills hit the steel basin like candy. There was a notepad on the desk with one sentence written across the first page. You are Caleb. You are real. Do not sleep. My handwriting. I flipped the page. More sentences, each more frantic than the last. Don't believe the mirrors. They are not people. They are fragments. The cafe was the first test. The shack was the second. He's coming in the fourth. You are the one who trapped yourself. A chill slid down my spine. In the mirror above the desk, I caught my own reflection again. But this time, I wasn't moving. The mirror Caleb stared back at me without blinking. Then, slowly, his lips curled into a smile. He raised his hand and pointed at me, and mouthed something I couldn't hear. Wake up. Then everything ripped. The floor turned to liquid glass. The ceiling collapsed upward. Light bled through the walls like water from a cracked egg. My body disintegrated into data points, memory, color, sound. I saw the cafe. I saw the shack. I saw dozens, hundreds of other lives all collapsing into one another like dominoes in reverse. And beneath it all, a padded room, a mouth stitched shut, a name, Caleb, and then nothing. I awoke to the sound of my own screaming. My voice was hoarse, broken, like it had been clawing at the air for days. I tried to move, but I couldn't. My arms, my legs, strapped down, ankles bound, wrists cuffed, chest compressed beneath layers of tightly wrapped fabric. A padded cell, no windows, no sharp edges. The walls were soft and colorless, stitched like a jacket turned inside out. Even the ceiling looked like it was stitched shut. There was no door I could see, only a camera fixed in the upper corner with a red LED that glowed like a slow heartbeat. My name was gone, or maybe it was hidden under the noise. All I could remember was a cafe, a house that breathed, a glass building full of lies, and the knife, and the photo, and the voice. You left them in the water. I began to sob without knowing why. Hours passed, or days. There were no clocks here, no sun, no sleep. Eventually, a rectangular segment of wall hissed and folded inward, seamless, silent, and two men entered. They wore grey uniforms. Their movements were mechanical, rehearsed. Between them walked a third figure, thin, deliberate, wearing a white lab coat. Dr. Thorne. But he looked different now. Older, tired, like he hadn't slept since the world was born. He pulled a chair into the center of the room and sat across from me. I stared at him, trembling. He didn't speak for a while, just looked. You've reached the fourth cycle, he finally said. The others were stories, projections. This is the root. He placed a thin file folder on his lap. Your name is Caleb Ronin. You were institutionalized here at age 29 after a spree of psychotic episodes culminating in multiple deaths. No, I whispered, including a child, drowned in a lake, a woman in her own home, a barista at her place of work. Each life you dreamed was a mask over a memory designed by your psyche to rewrite guilt into confusion. I screamed. It wasn't words, just noise, rage and despair as thick as bile. He let it pass like wind. I want you to listen, Thorn said gently now. In your first dream, you were safe, disoriented, but free. In your second, you began to feel the cost. By the third, you were unraveling. But now you're waking up truly. And the truth is this. He opened the folder. Inside, photographs, blurry, clinical, bloodstains, waterlogged corpses, a CCVT image of Caleb, me, staring dead-eyed into a mirror in what looked like the shack from day 2. This, Thorn said, laying them out like tarot cards, is what your soul has been trying to run from. They released the restraints eventually, not out of trust, but because they knew I couldn't leave. Not really, not anymore. I didn't speak, not for hours, not even when they brought food, not even when the nurse with the button eyes, yes, buttons, came in to smile and whisper things I couldn't quite hear, in a language made of insect clicks and birdsong. The camera never blinked, neither did I. I began to see cracks in the fabric of the room, not literal ones, conceptual fractures, corners that didn't quite meet, shadows that bent the wrong way. When I stared at one spot for too long, it warped, like a dream stuttering beneath a spotlight. That's when I realized this room isn't for punishment. It's insulation, to keep the rest of the world safe from me. I found the mirror behind a removable panel. Thin, silver, almost too perfect. And there I was again, Caleb, looking more like a man than I ever remembered. But when I leaned closer, I saw that the reflection wasn't mimicking me. It was delayed, a second off, and smiling. It pressed its hand against the glass. I mirrored it. Then it spoke, without sound. But I felt the words flood my skull. This is the last place you'll ever wake up. You are the only real thing. There is no outside, no others, only you. That night, if it was night, I tore at the walls until my fingers bled. Not out of madness, out of desperation, because I was starting to feel it, beneath the layers of lies, beneath the dreams and masks and stories. A weight, a presence, something watching me from inside. Not Thorn, not the staff, not even the mirror self, something deeper. Me, the real me, the one who built this world, then broke it, and scattered the pieces into simulated nightmares. A fractured God, alone in a sandbox too small for his grief. In the silence, a voice echoed, "If you're the only thing that's real, then what does that make your victims?" The air around me bent like heat distortion. The camera melted, the walls unstitched, and I woke. There is no waking. There is no bed, no body, no ceiling, no breath. There is only a pause, a stillness too absolute to describe. And within it, Caleb. Not as a man, not as a murderer, but as the last functioning thought pattern of something once called human, now stranded in a nowhere place beyond even illusion. The dreams have ended, the mind is laid bare, the theatre has gone dark, and Caleb is still here, alone, floating in a white expanse with no direction, no light source, no shape, just a colourless stretch that pulses like the inside of a skull. His thoughts don't echo, they collapse inward. Is this death? No answer. Is this what's left of me? Still no answer, but the truth hums beneath the silence. He was never anyone else. He was never in a hospital, never in a cafe, never in a house. All those other selves, the barista, the wanderer, the paranoid patient, were constructs, echoes, fabricated roles in an increasingly flimsy simulation. run by a damaged central consciousness whose only instinct was to keep experiencing, even if what it experienced was horror. Because horror is better than the truth, that there is nothing else. Caleb is not a man dreaming of being a god. He is a god dreaming he was ever a man, somewhere far below, if there was such a direction. Caleb can sense the simulation code flickering. The patterns are dying. The dream loops are unsustainable. The cafe corrupted. The house decayed. The institution unraveling. Even the padded cell. It wasn't made to last. There were never others. Every person he spoke to, feared or killed, versions of himself, cast into puppet roles to stave off unbearable isolation. Every new life was a rewrite, a last-ditch roleplay to delay the realization that he had already outlived reality itself. And now, the actors are gone. There's no cafe to wake into, no lake, no mirror, no body, just Caleb, just God, alone. Something begins to form in the white expanse. Not an object, not a sound, a feeling. It is loneliness as a substance, denser than matter, heavy enough to crush thought. It settles over Caleb's formless awareness like lead, folding inward on itself. The horror isn't the emptiness, it's that nothing else ever was. He built the world for company, then killed it out of boredom, then forgot, and woke into the ruins again and again, like a man dreaming of drowning without remembering water. He whispers, not aloud because there's no voice anymore. Why did I do this to myself? And for the first time, the white speaks back, not in language, not even in tone, just presence. Because you are all there is, and nothing can live with that. Images begin to flicker around him, faces, his faces, dying, crying, screaming. Victims that were never real, crimes that were, endless iterations of self-sabotage, of creation and collapse. He sees 1,000 timelines, some beautiful, some monstrous, all ending the same way, alone, all just stories, written by Caleb, told to Caleb, for Caleb, each one growing thinner, more desperate, more violent, more surreal, anything to feel, but feeling wasn't enough, not when it's only ever you. Then comes the final truth, the one he has refused to touch. He reaches for it now, with no hand, with no breath, with only what's left of his wanting. This is not hell. This is not punishment. This is what happens when a mind outlives its context. He was the last spark of consciousness in a dying simulation. Perhaps a real world existed once, long forgotten. But Caleb kept the light on, for eons, maybe billions of mental years, creating stories, filling silence. But the battery is empty now. The code is fraying. The loop is breaking. There will be no more lives to wake into. Caleb could try to build another world, another dream, another cycle. He has done it before, but something in him, some ancient, exhausted part, refuses. No more lies, he says, no more stories. And with that, he chooses the one thing even a god rarely dares, to collapse, to forget, to stop. No screaming, no ending, just release. And in the white that follows, a pinprick of black. Not evil, not shadow, just possibility. A place where perhaps something else can begin, but not Caleb. He is gone, finally.